Okay, yes, so I'm Alistair Kirkbride. I live near Kendal, but I work nationally on sustainable transport and have done for about the last 20 years, I suppose. If I spoke, if I do one thing, I suppose, is that I try to take quite a lot of this research and try to bolt it down to what it means more locally. And so living more locally, and my grandparents from Millham and Flukeborough, so I know this area quite well, I suppose. What I'm going to try to do today is just boil down a load of ideas to things that might be more relevant to the places we sort of recognize, I suppose. And this is the wrong slide to begin with, so let's start at the right one. And so I'm just going to whistle through just some ideas that other people have suggested about what we need to know. Now Gillian has given a lot of argument behind a lot of these, but I really just want to illustrate to you that we don't have to start from scratch here. So I'm going to show you two sets of ideas that have been put together specifically for what needs to be done in order to reduce carbon from how people travel around. But I would invite you to think about how these work for the sorts of places that are familiar to you locally. And so this is by a woman called Lisa Hopkinson, who works for Transport for Quality of Life. And it basically boils down a lot of the complexity to four fairly simple ideas. Firstly, and a lot of these will be echoing what Gillian said earlier. Firstly, this mentions reallocating road space, basically make more space for walking and cycling. Most people's journeys are fairly local, and at the moment a lot of people are put off walking and cycling simply because it's quite difficult to do. Secondly, improve cycle networks. And again, I would absolutely endorse what Gillian was saying about in the sorts of area we're talking about here. It's not just in the middle of Barrow. It's Barrow to Askham and to Kirby, and between the villages and between where people work, where people live, and where people go shopping, rather than just where it's easy to build a bit of cycle path. But those cycle networks, some cycle networks are used by things other than bikes more than they are by bikes. So there's some great ones in the northeast of England that are used more by pushchairs and wheelchair users than they are by cyclists. So see cycle network as a shorthand for just routes that you use when you're not in a car. Perhaps contentiously, possibly to a lot of ears, make buses free. And you might think, come on, come off it. There are over 100 places around the world now, towns and cities, where buses are completely free, and they're free in all sorts of different ways in order to encourage people to use them. But actually, quite a lot of the evaluation of these schemes means that more people use them, and actually there is more money then recycled back into the local economy as a result of those behaviours. And so making them free actually makes an awful lot more sense than maybe initially people think about that. And then related to that is the idea of an eco levy. So at the moment we pay taxes, we pay revenue, we pay for fuel that goes into our tank, we pay for travelling in all sorts of different ways. What this is suggesting is an eco levy idea is make sure that the money that goes into the stuff that's causing the problem can actually be captured and shifted towards the stuff that we need to do in order to reduce carbon. One of my opening points I forgot to make is to really, really emphasize what Gillian said. Low carbon transport systems make for really good places. So whilst we're talking about carbon reduction tonight primarily, the lot of places where these things happen are fantastic for all sorts of other reasons. Local economies are highly prosperous. There's healthier lifestyles, all those other things that we want through for our places to be. This is just an example of another organisation that has tried to do the same thing. And again, you will have these slides. This is by an organisation called City Science, but it was done for the Royal Town Planning Institute. So this is done to try to influence how places are designed and planned, which is the other side of transport. If we didn't have to live quite as far away from everything, because our schools are more local, our workplaces are more local to where we live, we wouldn't have to travel as much. So that's why it was done. And I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I want you to recognize that a lot of people have done quite a lot of thinking in terms of what would this mean for places where people live, work, and do other activities. And so it suggests, again, you know, we need better cycling, we need to be more pedestrian friendly, we need electric car club networks, we need better public transport and electric shuttle buses and all the rest of it. So, so a lot of work has been done on this and boiled down to some key ideas. I've tried to boil all this down to 4 ideas, though, and this is me screwing my absolute pragmatic hat on. And if someone said, right, tell me 4 top things, I would say we need to crack walking and cycling locally. And that's not for people who currently see themselves as walkers and cyclists. It's for everybody so they can get around locally easily, whether that's walking to school, whether it's cycling to work, on sunny days in the middle of summer, or on your electric bike if it's a bit further. Secondly, public transport. We need really good, fast, frequent public transport along the busy corridors that links to what we call demand responsive transport. Throw the alarm bells open for jargon here. These are basically shuttles that you can call on your phone or by an app or whatever that comes to you and takes you to where you want to get to within reason across a zone. And so in the Furness area, these would link into the buses that go along the corridors. And I put there, these could be free as well. We might want to talk about that later.
Couple of minutes, Alistair, just under a couple of minutes.
That's fine, yes, thank you. Thirdly, and attached to all of these are integrated shared transport networks. And again, Gillian has alluded to this. I've worked a lot in the past on car clubs, call them what you will, car sharing, but pay-as-you-drive cars. So imagine every neighborhood has a pod of cars that you can walk up to with your phone, open the doors with your phone, use the car, bring it back, bung it there, lock the doors or walk away, and you get a bill at the end of the month. The same can happen for electric bike pods, like the bike schemes in large cities that you may have seen and some of you will have used, I'm assuming, as well. But these are neighborhood based. You don't have to go a long way to get to these things. So it's closer and closer to owning a private car, but without your private car sitting on your drive for 96, 98% of the time going nowhere. But also, there are ways now of allowing rides to be shared more easily, so we don't have just one person in the car. But then knitting all of this together is integration. You don't want to think, oh, shall I get on the bus and pay that fare and come back on a train, or shall I get a bike? Or it's all really complicated at the moment, and it doesn't have to be. We can start looking to places like London and to Birmingham, where you can have effectively your travel account. You choose how you want to travel and you just get charged for it at the end of the month, or however you set those things up. And there are places around the world now that demonstrate that when you integrate together different travel options, people use sustainable options out of choice because it provides them with a better lifestyle than the lifestyle they had previously. And just a final slide. This was some work done by someone who actually works with Gillian. And all I'm going to say is that the dark areas are so this is looking at potential electric bike use. And I apologize because it's only for the national park, but hey ho, we go with what we have. The darker areas are the areas where you can save more carbon from electric bike use. And the lighter areas clearly are less carbon. Now it only goes to the park boundary, but whenever anyone looks at electric bike potential, it reveals that electric bike use in more rural areas has significant potential for reducing carbon dioxide emissions, because it allows people to replace car journeys with journeys on that they wouldn't otherwise consider necessarily using a bike for. Give them an electric bike and it becomes possible. If they don't have to shell out 2,000 quid for that electric bike or more, because there is a shared electric bike locally in their neighborhood, it becomes even more possible. So Gillian mentioned it, I'm emphasizing it. Okay, brilliant. So I'm just throwing that in to illustrate some really, really good evidence out there once you want to start drilling down into the detail of what's possible. Okay, thank you.